Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. A few Tuesdays ago, we discussed motivation and how that would keep yourself or your character going with all odds against him or her. Today, we're going to discuss influence, and we will have a writing assignment. In life, many people influence us, whether we briefly meet a person or read their book, or we know the person all our lives, or the influence could be from society as a whole. Some people have a small influence on us, and some have a large and quite influential impact on us. Some have a positive influence. Some have a negative influence. Of course, you can learn from someone else's mistake. So their bad influence could be a positive thing for you. Or exactly the opposite, when you see that you could never be as good as someone else, which is a mental perception. It's not necessarily true. But when you perceive that, so you don't even try. So that means their good influence turns out negative in your life. It's because instead of saying, well, they could do it, I could do it too, you're like, oh, I can't do it, I shouldn't even try. So you could have it go either way from somebody else's influence over you. Why am I talking about this? Well, it's good to know how people influence us in our lives, so we know how people influence our characters. In the story we just read, City of the Ancients, we briefly heard how Kirian's adopting parents always spoke negatively about Kirian. So that influence made him lack confidence. Excuse me. I'm sure you know people in your life who feel like nothing they ever do will be good enough for someone else in their life. How much different would Kirian have been in the story if his adopting parents had always praised him? The story would have been quite different. Now, I've spoken to you about knowing your character's histories. And this is part of that. When you know the history that you create, of course, then you know the influence over that person. Of course, influence would add to or subtract from motivation. How much internal motivation would you have if you're always told you're a failure? Now be careful. Be careful of your answer, because perspective or attitude still plays a role. A person might just give up. Or they might be determined to prove that other person wrong. Think of the sentiments, I'll show her that I can do it. In this case, the negative influence pushes the determination and the motivation to succeed. Okay, our writing assignment is to think of a person that has had some influence on your life. It could be a small amount or a big amount. The influence could be bad or good. It could affect you positively or negatively. Think about the influence of the person and how the person affected your life, and write about it. You can write in first person, which is where you use I and me for the character. I saw, I felt, I thought, said to me, looked at me, etc. So pause the video and write about a person that influenced you, and then come back and I will share what I wrote. Welcome back, writers. Now I will read what I wrote. My dad seemed like a good old boy to most people who knew him. He was always willing to help his neighbors with their roof or fence, but he didn't always take care of the things at home. His own family could not depend on him to mow the grass, much less fix something broken in or around the home. My father was an alcoholic, and he just didn't protect me as a father should. During my youth, many people bullied me, but my father didn't stand up for me. Several molested me, but my father kept his friends. The most important things to my father were not his family, not his wife, not his children, certainly not me, even though I was, quote, favored by him. Yes, he loved, but not enough to do what was necessary. The most important things in his life were his beer and his cigarettes and his stubbornness. My father would get drunk and tear up the house in his rage. When I was very young, my mother would take my sister and me to my grandmother's house during the night, or she would take us down the street to a friend's house. Then she would go home, clean things up, so my sister and I didn't know my father's destruction. I learned about that after the divorce and after I moved in with my father. Talk about shock. The first time I witnessed my father punch the refrigerator and toss the TV across the room. Supposedly, and my father didn't remember his rage, but he would remember if I said something he didn't like. To me, that was selective memory. And I didn't believe that he didn't know what he did when he got too drunk to remember things. One time, he even told me that I didn't need to scream at him, even though he grabbed my stepmother by the throat, drug her out of the house. He told me I didn't need to scream because he hadn't hurt her. But in the morning, I saw bruises all up and down her throat. He had hurt her. After I moved to college, I half-heartedly tried to keep in contact with my father, but he never returned my calls or my letters. This influence affected me in several ways. One, I'm dependable, unlike my father, who was not dependable. I help my family and do the things that I need to do for my family. I respond to their messages. That they always say that I respond first, so they will get quite worried if I don't respond. I will do things for my family and friends before I do them for myself. Like my writing will be put off to the side or off to the back burner if I think I need to help somebody else. So I am always last in my list, and so that's not really a good thing, and I probably need to have more balance. 2, the second influence, I don't drink. At least not more than a glass at Christmas time. 3, I protect, or I try to. I stand against people who bully others, but not against people who bully me. Once I moved out of my father's home the second time, I went back once so that my father could meet my first daughter. Then later, after I had my second daughter and my father was picking my sister up from my mom's house, I was visiting my mom, and so my dad was coming to pick up my sister. My father wanted to hold my second daughter, but he wouldn't even put down his cigarette. I decided right then and there, my children didn't need to be around him. Later, as an adult, I thought I would try to have a relationship with him. So I called him up and picked him up for lunch after I had dropped off my children for school. My father was greasy and unclean like he always was, and he hadn't changed anything about himself. He never called or wrote, so I no longer pursued a relationship with him anymore. My father passed away on May 15, 2016. I felt no remorse. My father could no longer beat up any houses in his drunken rage. He will smoke no more cigarettes. He will not drag anyone else down the hall by the throat. Also, my father left nothing behind. He accomplished nothing in his life. The only thing left was a pile of empty beer cans for us, or my stepsisters, to recycle. So for me, I want to accomplish something in my life. I want my life to mean something. I want to leave my legacy behind. And it needs to be something grand instead of something that sucks the life out of those around me. My father's advice was, if the horse is dead, then get off and walk. That advice can be hard to follow if you're working towards your dream and you think that you're really close, but there are things that tell you that you got to stop because it's not working. And so it's very hard to get off that horse and walk. But it was not hard to follow concerning our father-daughter relationship. I got up and walked away. But I walked away with many scars. I walked away knowing that I was not someone worthy of protecting. I walked away knowing that I was worth less to my father than a can of beer or a cigarette. And I walked away knowing that it was too much trouble for my father to even pick up the phone and call me. What child who ever lived is worth so little as I was worth to my own father? Part of me wishes I had never been born. But part of me wants to prove to him and the world that I have worth. I have value. My father has passed away and will never see my worth. But I still have myself to prove that to. Okay, writers, that is the influence my father had over me. As you can see, this was a great influence, and the influence wasn't good. But I'm not a drunk like my father. So the influence was to not be like him and to not let people down like he did. Now, if you talk to other people, my friends, about me, they may tell you of my accomplishments. But a lot of times I still don't see them. And I know no matter what I accomplish in my life, I simply can't compete with a can of beer. So that is like someone always trying and feeling like they always fail. One step, one step, one step. I keep going, keep going. But I never look back and see the road I've come down. I just look at how much farther I have to go. I just keep going. Sometimes being Dory in Finding Nemo is appealing. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And don't worry about what was in the past because you can't remember it, To be honest, I will tell you that I've come a long way. And I can see it. I don't so much look at or dwell on the past anymore or try to obtain that love that was never there. But I'm not as happy and outgoing as I would like to be. Now, as writers, the question is, how would you cast someone like myself in a story or yourself in a story? How does that influence affect the actions of the characters? If my father had such great influence over me, then how will the parents of my characters influence them? In Mykela, I have two characters that had parents that had a bad influence. One was a father, and one had a mother with bad influence. And this bad influence affects their witching. They just don't have the confidence they need to work all of their spells, especially not the first time trying. Now, these aren't major characters, but also they aren't their potential because of that negative influence. Another character in this series had a lot of praise, and she overly values herself, but she will never be a witch for Mykela, and she will have to go to Queen Zashura, a black witch queen, to see if she can be a witch for her. Influence is a lot to think about. Sorry about all this makeup smear. Influence is a lot to think about, and we should have discussed it before motivation. But everything works together. Influence builds perspective or perception, and it affects our motivation. If we simply don't believe we are capable of doing something, will we even have the motivation to try? The same is true of our characters. Most of our stories don't start with, in the beginning, there was Adam and Eve. Our stories start in the middle of somewhere. In life, there are cycles. And in my childhood was a cycle of emotional abuse and alcoholism. My father's father was an alcoholic as well. Sometimes learning the history helps, because now I know that was just who my father was. And it didn't really have anything to do with me or how capable or how good I am or was. But it was influence over me, because at a young child age, I couldn't process all of that. I didn't have that information to process. Now, hundreds of hours after reading self-help books and hundreds of hours of therapy, I can handle it. And the best part is, it makes me a better writer. I know that everything is not rainbows, unicorns, and roses. I know roses have thorns and rainbows have ends. I also know that rainbows only come after the storms of life. If I thought everything in life was peaches and cream, then I would know nothing about the struggles needed to build the climax. I would not know how the main character would face her inner fears, and I would not know about the transformation of my protagonist or any other character I wrote in the story and took along the journey. If you want to share what you wrote today, then send it to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. Send written permission if you want me to read it on the channel. Leave a comment below on who you wrote about today that influenced you. And if you're brave enough, leave a comment on if that influence was good or bad, or if the effect on you was good or bad. Join me Friday for Chapter 2 of Tahia, Part of My Name. Join me Tuesday for more writing jargon or another writing prompt. In between days, visit my website, www.bymykela.com, and read some character bios. The characters I talked about today were Gracie, Carty, and Dahlia. Those are in the Miacha series again, so you can go and you can read about their history. If you hit like, subscribe, and the bell notification, then we can continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.